Hello and welcome as we continue this look at A.K. Warder's Grammar Guide, An Introduction to Pali. And there's a link below to the source text if you don't already have it. Today we're looking at Lesson 11, Adjectives in Pali. This is Pali Studies on the Learn Pali channel. We've actually been touching on adjectives for some time now, when we looked at pronominal adjectives and verbal adjectives in the form of participles. Now we're going to look at what we might term ordinary adjectives. Adjectives are words that add properties or describe people, places, things or ideas. And just to be clear, we'll call this type of word a substantive. Pali makes little distinction between substantives and adjectives. Technically, substantives have only the one gender, whilst adjectives can take any of the three. And this is similar to how we could say a baby. As a substantive, this would only have the one gender in Pali. But when used as an adjective qualifying another noun, it will agree in gender as well as case and number with the substantive qualified. So the term adjective here is more to do with how the noun is being used rather than as a separate class of nouns altogether. Okay, let's take as an example this verse from the Dhammapada. And if we remind ourselves of the A-stem nominal endings, here we have 3 lines of verse which all begin with the adjective diga. Diga, digang and digo all mean long, but have different endings in order to agree with the substantives that they qualify. So diga is feminine nominative to agree with rati, digang is neuter, and digo is masculine. Notice diga is an A-stem noun, whilst rati is an I-stem. Both are nominative feminine, but I-stem nouns have a different declension pattern. And also, here in this lesson, Warder only considers A-stem nouns. Adjectives are mainly A-stem nouns, and take the endings as shown in the table above. There's actually quite a few different types of uses of adjectives in these 3 lines of verse. For instance, jagarato is actually a present participle, meaning waking, and here it stands as a substantive, indicating a person that is awake. On the next line, Santa is a past participle, meaning tired, and here stands for one who is tired. And on the last line, Bala is a straight adjective, meaning childlike or ignorant, and used here to mean an ignorant person. So let's just recap the different ways adjectives can be used. The most simple is what I'm calling the normal adjectival use. The wise man knows the way, the foolish man knows not. So, with all types of words which act as adjectives, the attribute agrees with its substantive in gender, case and number. And the most usual position for this type of use is for the attribute to come before the noun it qualifies. But it's also quite common in the suttas to string lists of adjectives together, all describing the same substantive. In this case, usually one adjective comes first, the next is the substantive noun itself, and the other adjectives then follow. Grammatically, they all act as a single unit, a noun phrase, and here in this example, it's the subject of the verb. But they can also be predicative. This is when something is asserted about the substantive, but loosely it's when there is a copular verb, either explicit or implied, linking or equating the 2 nouns together. The term predicative is now an old term, and most modern grammars would use a different term, here a subject complement, because the adjective completes the verb to be. It's a necessary argument in order for the verb to make sense. And in this type of use, the most usual position for the adjective is following its substantive. And notice that the attribute, being an adjective, takes the case of its substantive rather than being an object of the verb, in which case it would be an accusative case. Similar to this, the adjective can be appositional. This is like a combination of the adjectival and the predicative use. In this case, the attribute follows its substantive, but here the two nouns are grammatically parallel. Either could stand as an argument of the verb, while both refer to the same thing. And also, as we've seen, they can stand alone in the place of the person or thing that they qualify, in which case they act as substantives. Pandito here means the wise man or the wise one, and Barlow means a fool. And this use as a substantive is especially true of the neuter gender, when adjectives tend to act like abstract nouns. And perhaps we should add here that neuter nouns are also frequently adverbial. In this line from the Satipatthana Sutra, he knows I breathe out short. The word short, although it's in accusative, is not an object, but describes the manner of breathing, and is therefore an adverb. Whereas adjectives add qualities to substantives, adverbs or adverbial phrases add qualities that describe the action or the sentence as a whole. So it's possible to make an adjective into an adverb simply by placing it in the neuter accusative singular. And note, while acting as an adverb, they are in effect indeclinable, and so do not change to agree with anything in the sentence. And we've actually seen most of this before, so let's move on. Warder next looks at the third conjugation of the present stem. We've seen previously that the first class is characterized by the root affix a, the seventh by e or ea, and the sixth by o. Well, the third class is characterized by the root affix ya. If the root ends in a vowel, ya is added directly. However, when the root ends in a consonant, ya assimilates in the same manner that we've seen before, often resulting in a doubling of the previous consonant. So we can take a look at a few examples. Because of that suffix ya, the third conjugation often looks like a passive stem that we saw back in lesson 9. Many verbs of the third class are intransitive and so can't be passive, and those that are transitive often form the passive on the present stem and not the root. But the best way to determine if a verb is passive or a third conjugation present is to look it up in the dictionary. And of course, once we've formed the stem, these take the standard inflectional endings that we've already seen, the indicative, the imperative, or the aorist. Next, Warder returns to the formation of the past participle. While most past participles are formed by adding the affix ta to either the root or the present stem, some roots can also take the affix na. And this is especially true for roots ending in a long I or a long U, when it's added directly. A few roots in long A take na with the insertion of a joining I, whilst roots ending in a d or a r may take na directly, which then assimilates and duplicates the n sound. And with roots ending in a j or a g, this results in a double g. Of course, these then all decline, like A-stem nouns. Finally, Warder details the irregular aorist or past tense forms of the verb roots dis and gam. Although Warder presents these as irregular forms, I think the first form is an example of what some grammar guides call the thematic or a-aorist. This form of aorist generally takes the augment prefix, and you may wish to recap the aorist forms that we saw back in lesson 4. Now, this form only occurs on verbal roots, and is so called because an affix a is added to the root before a specific set of aorist personal endings are applied. But most guides merge these down to one set of endings for simplicity. The reason to break down the table in this way is to understand why the second paradigm that Warder gives labels some of the entries as double inflections. So hopefully now you can see that the second paradigm that Warder gives for the verb gam has compounded forms, at least for the singular endings. Note how that thematic a vowel is inserted before the s-based aorist endings that we saw in Lesson 4. One word of caution here, grammar guides vary greatly on how they slice up the various aorist forms, so this is just one method of presentation. Thankfully, the so-called aorist endings aren't that common except for these particular verbs, so it's possibly best just to memorize these. And we finish with exercise 11. The answers to exercise 10 can be found on the Wisdom and Wonders website, linked in the description below. Next week, in Lesson 12, we'll cover the dative noun case and also relative pronouns. These are actually quite big subjects, and I might have to split them across 2 tutorials, but let's see how I go. Okay, in the meantime, there's always more grammar tutorials on the Learn Pali channel.